3 summers after I carried 3 funeral urns home, I found my daughter alive in a Texas grocery store, squeezing avocados and laughing about dinner. I stood between bulk rice and laundry detergent and decided to give my family the funeral they actually deserved, not flowers, but handcuffs. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. My name is Frank Holloway. I am 71 years old, a retired machinist, a grandfather, a widower of 10 years. I have a bum knee that clicks when rain comes in, and I keep a little tin of peppermint candies in my pocket because my granddaughter Lily used to ask for one every Sunday after church. She was 9 the day the state trooper took off his hat at my door and told me there had been a tanker explosion on I-75. A pileup. Fires so hot the paint ran from the cars and the road itself buckled like a ribbon. "We think your daughter's minivan was in the middle of it," he said. "We think." He said it 2 more times, as if the words softened anything. They found 3 sets of remains that fit the profile. A phone I had given Lily for safety, shattered but tagged with her number. A bracelet June, my daughter, never took off. The son-in-law's wedding ring. The county coroner made me sign papers I could not keep in focus. The funeral home told me closed caskets would be best. I signed checks and thank you notes. The church filled with casseroles and consolations. The cross above the altar seemed to lean closer while I stood at the pulpit and read a eulogy no man should ever read. I spoke about June's muddy cleats on my kitchen floor, about Nathan's ridiculous laugh, about Lily's habit of hiding her drawings behind the sugar canister for me to find later. I talked about a lifetime of Sundays. Afterward the congregation filed by, taking my hands one by one and pressing their sympathy into my bones. I went home to a quiet house and 3 little boxes I could not bring myself to open. I set them on a shelf and sat in my recliner, and the silence in the room was a sound you do not forget. It has edges. I did not crumble. That is the miracle and the cruelty of being old. You have rehearsed grief so many times that by the time the worst arrives, your body knows exactly how to stand up, turn off the lights, and live anyway. I mowed the lawn. I borrowed library books I never finished. The men at the VFW hall kept my coffee hot and the conversation softer than it needed to be. On the 1-year mark, I planted a Japanese maple for each of them in my backyard and made little plaques from scrap brass in my garage: June, Nathan, Lily. On the 2-year mark, I changed my will and divided the house between the church, the county food bank, and a scholarship fund I named after my wife, Ruth. On the 3rd year, I brought lilies to the grassy spot where my daughter used to pretend the stones were stepping stones to a secret kingdom. Then, the letter came. It was innocuous, a postcard about a school fundraiser, addressed to grandparent of Liliana Harper. I almost threw it out. Our town gets everything wrong in the mail eventually. The sorting machine is older than some of the retirees who keep it chugging. But the address in the return corner made my hand stop halfway to the trash can. New Braunfels, Texas. Sutter Creek Elementary. Somewhere between the letters and numbers, something in my chest went tight and hot. The name was nearly, but not exactly, my granddaughter's. The last name didn't match any of ours. Maybe a coincidence. The world is full of lilies. But who had listed my old post office box, my box, on a school's grandparent mailer in Texas? An hour later, I found the cause. An old Gmail account, the one Ruth made us keep for coupons, had a message in the promotions tab from the same school, the same fundraiser. There was a hyperlink to Grandparents' Day RSVP. I hovered over it and saw my own email as the alternate contact for a student named Liliana. The event blurb had a line, "For families with grandparents out of state, you can add a personal note to be read to the child in class." I read it 3 times. The note attached, short and sweet, with the grammar mistakes my daughter made when she typed too fast. "Hi Lil. G-Pa loves you all the way from Ohio. Sorry he can't come but he's thinking of you. Be kind and brave." I know my daughter's voice. She stitched that line into bedtime routines and dentist visits and first day of 3rd grade pep talks. Be kind and brave. She had typed a lie about me living far away so a teacher in Texas would read it to my granddaughter. I did not call anyone. I did not tell the men at the VFW. I did not tell Pastor Helen, even though she would have made the right kind of comfort noises and brewed the good coffee. I set the postcard on the kitchen table like it might explode. Then I printed the email and folded it into my wallet, behind the photo of Ruth holding baby June with the squinting pride of a woman who would have fought the entire world with her bare hands to keep us safe. I left the house at dawn the next day. For a man who has spent a lifetime fixing things with wrenches and sandpaper, there is a special helplessness in buying a plane ticket on a phone. I squinted and stabbed fat fingers at the screen, and by lunchtime I had a confirmation code and a seat assignment. The woman behind the counter at the Cincinnati airport asked me 6 times if I needed a wheelchair. I told her 6 times the day I cannot walk to meet what needs meeting is the day she can push me anywhere she wants. I rented a car in San Antonio and drove north on an interstate that wore heat like a cloak. The sky was bigger than it had any right to be. I pulled onto the shoulder once because a field of wildflowers on a ranch made my hands ache with a memory of Ruth's garden. And then I saw the sign, New Braunfels. I parked under live oaks outside a school painted the color of a robin's egg. Sutter Creek Elementary had that particular smell all schools have, whiteboard cleaner and crayons and a faint, sweet chalkiness. I sat on a bench outside the front office and watched the stream of parents and grandparents moving in small, purposeful flocks. The secretary's computer screensaver floated a message across the glass, "Welcome Grandparents' Day." Apples printed on borders. Smiling cartoon owls in graduation caps. I did not go inside. The law in me, what little a machinist knows and a widower respects, told me to be careful. I waited by the flagpole until classes let out and the sidewalk filled with children whose laughter could have cracked every brittle piece of me if I let it in. Then she came out of the side door holding a paper crown with glitter that kissed the last of the Texas sun. Lily. 4 inches taller than the last time I saw her. Hair longer. Same nose Ruth used to pinch and call her button. A backpack almost as big as she was. She looked left, right, then smiled and ran toward a woman standing under the shade of a tree. June. My daughter. There is a certain kind of knowledge you do not absorb so much as collide with. My body tried to find any alternative story. I told myself this was a ghost that the heat bent into shape. But the way she shifted her weight to the left to favor the knee she injured playing soccer in 10th grade, the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the way she crouched to Lily's height and checked for a scraped elbow like you could fix the world by kissing it, those are not illusions. She wore a sundress the color of limes. A simple gold chain on her neck. A tattoo I did not know above her ankle, 3 small birds. She had taken a new name. The teacher called out, "Harper." And she turned her head like a reflex. Nathan walked up with a brown bag of groceries and a half-smile I had always thought was harmless. I watched him stoop to give Lily a twirl, then hand June a receipt. They were an ordinary family in an ordinary parking lot at the ordinary end of a school day. There are calm ways to do uncalm things. I stepped behind the live oak with the trunk that could hide a younger man than me and lifted my phone. I pressed the button like it was the trigger on a nail gun and took 20 photographs in a row. June's profile. Lily's backpack. Nathan's hand on June's shoulder as they talked about what looked like avocados sticking stubbornly through the top of the paper bag. A minivan pulled up, a different one than the steel tomb I buried 3 summers ago. Texas plates. A bumper sticker that said, "Support your local library." June opened the sliding door and Lily climbed in. Nathan kissed June on the temple. They did not look like conspirators. They looked like people who had set a difficult thing down and felt lighter for it. They drove away. I started counting without meaning to, an old habit from the shop floor when you measure out units so precisely the numbers lodge in your mouth. By the time I got to 100, my hands had stopped shaking. At H-E-B, what Texans call their grocery store like it is a cousin, you can buy a bag of grapefruit as big as a basketball. You can also sit at a little coffee counter and watch people do the things they only do when they believe no one is watching. June took fruit in both hands, assessing ripeness with the same concentration she used on term papers in high school. I sat 10 feet away with a small coffee turned cold in my hand and took a picture of my daughter picking produce in a city where she had never lived, with a name that was not hers. I think I knew then exactly what they had done. The accident had given them a clean edge. Phones left in a dashboard. Jewelry in a pocket. A fire so hot that, we think, becomes legally sturdy enough for a signature. Grief is a curtain. If you do not want to see, it will help you not see. They had taken their chance and run. Not for money, I checked the accounts I used to manage for them, and nothing had been drained. Not for fear of the law. No, this was a different kind of cowardice. They were escaping me. Not me, Frank. They were escaping the version of me they had started to speak about in low voices while washing dishes. The worry I would fall and not get up. The way I repeated myself when tired. The payments I made on their mortgage without ever asking for a thank you. The way my doctor had said the word stent last winter like it was a small life vest in a big sea. They looked at the runway of my old age and decided to taxi off to another airport. I sat in the grocery store and thought about how to kill people who were alive. There is the petty way. You walk up and say, "Hello June." "Hello Nathan." Do you remember the man who paid your first 6 months of rent, who held your daughter on his chest for the first 3 hours she was alive because you were too exhausted to lift your head, who brought casserole to your house when the dog died? Do you remember how you watched him take an oath in a church he helped paint and heard him say he would care for his family until the end, and then you decided the end was more convenient if you simply left? There is the righteous way. You walk into a police station. You hand a detective the photographs. You say words like fraud and abandonment and false death claims. You ask which prosecutor likes complicated, ugly cases and which judge in this county has a spine made of something stronger than convenience. There is the way my wife would have told me to take. Do not scorch the earth, Frank, she would have said, pinning a clothespin in her mouth while hanging sheets in the yard so they smelled like sunlight. Plant something where the fire went through. I did not go home that night. I sat in a motel where the air conditioner was either too loud or too quiet and wrote down a list of things I knew that no one else knew yet. I wrote down names of people who owed me favors. I wrote down that I would forego the satisfaction of shouting and reach instead for the longer consequence. I wrote down something that made my hand shake as I set the pen down. I will bury them properly. The county recorder in Comal County did not care what my last name was, only that my money was green and my purpose clear. For a small fee, you can look at the bones of a life, property filings, marriage licenses, business registrations. June Harper and Nathan Harper had leased a house in a development with a German-sounding name and a man-made lake. They had enrolled Lily at Sutter Creek. June had a part-time job at a dental office. Nathan worked at a car dealership and had the same half-smile in his staff photo. A week later, a private investigator named Zia, a friend of a friend from the VFW hall, sent me a Dropbox folder that felt like both a gift and a knife. Zia had taken a video through the chain-link fence of a soccer field where Lily ran the length of the earth with ponytail flying, had snapped a picture of June laughing with a woman from the PDA, had recorded Nathan grilling on a little patio with a neighbor while baseball murmured in the background on a radio. "You sure?" Zia asked when we met in a diner off the interstate where the coffee tasted like it had been poured through yesterday's grounds. "This gets messy fast." "I am." "Criminal or civil?" "Both," I said. "And something else." "What's that?" "Memorial." She looked at me like maybe I had lost a marble or two. I did not blame her. I paid her what we agreed. Then I drove home to Ohio and took the urns from the shelf, carried them to the workbench in the garage, and set them down. Brass on oak. The names on the plaques I had made looked suddenly childish, as if I had carved Hope and Idiot together with a Dremel tool. I wrote a letter to Pastor Helen and told her I needed to borrow the church hall on a Saturday in August. "We are hosting a funeral," I wrote, "for something that is hard to name." She called me an hour later and did not ask a single question, only offered to handle coffee and chairs. When you are old and have carried more than your share of caskets in and out of that building, some blessings arrive without ceremony. The sheriff came to my kitchen table with a young detective who failed to hide his excitement. There is nothing like a puzzle that can make a person who still believes in doing right feel like a child opening a box on Christmas morning. "Sir," he said, "do you understand what you are alleging?" "I am alleging that I buried 3 living people because 2 of them found being alive near me inconvenient." He wrote that down without looking up. It took 3 months to gather the pieces. Zia's photographs. My bank statements showing funeral payments and GoFundMe distributions I had funneled to pay for what I thought was the honorable thing. The initial accident report with its careful "we think." The coroner's report, noting closed caskets recommended because identification relied on items of personal significance recovered from scene. The school email. The security footage from HEB that Zia persuaded an assistant manager to share with a gift card and a truth he will someday have to justify to his boss. The utility start date on the Harper house. The fingerprints June had left on a file at the dental office where she worked under a false name that matched her social security number if you were willing to ignore the line between convenience and crime. You would think the moment of confrontation would be the firework. It is not. It is a slow match. We set it the way you set careful things. The prosecutor arranged a routine inquiry at the county courthouse in San Antonio, sent by certified mail to the Harper's rental address about a clerical error linked to a past incident out of state. It was vague enough to be boring. People often show up to boring. We booked the smallest hearing room and rigged the projector to the wall. I wrote a sentence on a legal pad and slid it into my shirt pocket. In case my mouth failed me, I wanted the words to come out anyway. On the morning of the hearing, I stood in the back of the room with my hat in my hands. There is a particular posture men of my generation fall into when the law is present, respectful, quiet, stubborn under it all like rebar in concrete. June walked in 10 minutes late, hair pulled back, sundress again, but blue this time. Nathan followed with his chin hovering between confident and cautious. Lily was at school. Thank God. There are some parts of a funeral a child should be spared. Name? The clerk asked. June Harper, my daughter said. The judge cleared her throat. The prosecutor, a woman the age my daughter used to be, sharp as pines in January, reviewed the file in front of her. I appreciate you coming, Mrs. Harper, she began. We have some housekeeping to do on a matter that originated in Hamilton County, Ohio, 3 years ago. If you will confirm a few things for the record, we will be brief. Nathan shifted in his chair. He recognized the words hiding inside the ones spoken aloud. For the record. Brief. The projector hummed to life. A photograph of a parking lot under a live oak filled the white wall, June's hand on Lily's backpack strap, Nathan's laugh caught half open. Then a still from the HEB security camera, avocados. A time stamp. A date. My daughter in a city where she had never lived while her eulogy yellowed in a file cabinet 1,000 miles away. Mrs. Harper, the prosecutor said gently, can you explain this? June smiled the way a person smiles when an uncomfortable but imprecise thing is happening. She tried out a lie. I watched it form under her cheekbone, then discarded it because it would not hold. That is me, she said. Then, perhaps remembering the webpage at the county where lying to a judge is called a crime even when the lie is polite, she added, I can explain. Please do. Her explanation did not fit in the room. It spilled over the edges and onto the hallway and down the stairs and out into the parking lot and kept going, because once you start telling the truth about why you pretended to be a ghost, the story is long. My father is not well, she said. I mean he is fine, but he is aging. He repeats things. He has trouble with ladders. He has a heart thing. She fluttered a hand and finally landed on the sentence that has killed more relationships than death ever has. We could not do it anymore. And so, the judge prompted. And so we left. Leaving is not a crime, the prosecutor said. But notice what you combined it with. Nathan finally spoke. We never filed anything. We never took any money. You accepted money for the funeral, I said. Both of them jumped as if the air in the room had coughed. My voice had dried into a sound that reminded me of the gravel that sits just under the surface of our Ohio soil. You let me stand in a church and pretend I knew how to grieve a life when what I was actually grieving was ethics. June's head turned slowly. She found me in the back of the room as if the distance we had jammed into 3 years could be cut with a glance. There is a kind of shame that arrives not as red in the cheeks, but as a sudden, old look in the eyes. She swallowed. Dad, she said. I had written my sentence on a card. I did not need it. You get one thing from me today, I said. You get to hear me say your name with the knowledge that I am saying it into a room where the truth matters. June Holloway, you do not get to edit me out of your life by writing me into a tomb. You left Ohio to save yourself the work and patience of loving an old man. I accept that, because love is not a contract. But you faked a death so you would not have to tell the truth. Now I will tell it for you. The prosecutor did her job with precision. The sheriff's deputy did his with gate-like solidity. There were no handcuffs in the room, that came later, after the polite part of the day was finished. Papers were slid across tables. Statements taken. I said the word abandonment in a way that felt like a shovel hitting a root. I said the word fraud and watched Nathan's face do the math a man does when the years he thought were safely in the past begin to stack up in front of him like a wall. We did not put my daughter in prison that day. That would come after more careful steps, after plea agreements crawled in and out of drafts, after a grand jury back home in Ohio listened to the prosecutor from Texas explain a particular human meanness that does not come with a single statute attached to it but fits neatly in the category of criminal mischief with consequences. That night I went back to my motel, set my hat on the little round table, and cried into my palms in a way I had not done since the day Ruth's breath lifted once and did not settle back down. I do not apologize for that. Grief has good reasons and bad reasons, and sometimes it is impossible to tell which you are carrying. The church hall on the August Saturday was packed. Pastor Helen had put out more chairs than we owned and then borrowed extra. There were photographs on poster boards, Ruth's idea, still moving the world even in the grave. The photos were not of June or Nathan or Lily. They were of the men and women in our county who had cooked soup for strangers during storms, of the kid from the corner house who shoveled 5 porches every snow day, of the woman who opened her spare room to a neighbor who needed a month to land. I had gone door to door with a box of old picture frames and asked for images of kindness. We called it a memorial for what did not die. The VFW men wore their best shirts. Mrs. Alvarez from 2 streets over, who had lost her son in a different war, put her hand on my shoulder during the hymn and left it there like a hinge. The sheriff sat in the second row and did not clap at the wrong places. We ate ham sandwiches on white bread and used napkins printed with lilies. I stood and told the story the way you set a dangerous tool on the table and make sure everyone can see where the edges are. I did not name June. I did not need to. After the hymn, Pastor Helen called the children up to the front for what she called a small ritual. She is very good at designing actions that force memory to move from the head to the hands. She gave each child a little seed packet and sent them down the aisles to the elders who have taught you something you want to keep. About halfway down, a child I did not recognize, a boy with a baseball cap too big for his head, stopped at my chair. "You are Lily's grandpa," he said with the certainty of a child who knows a thing that adults are too embarrassed to say out loud. "She says you keep mints in your pocket." "I do. Can I have one?" "Take 2, I said. Kindness multiplies better that way." The court case rolled. Our county took its time and did it right. June and Nathan came back to stand where the flag leans in that old courtroom with its creaking pews. Their lawyer said all the careful words lawyers say. Ours said words like false representation, and financial harm, and deceptive practices, and willful infliction of emotional distress. The judge, a man who had coached me in Little League in 1963, looked at me twice in a way that told me he held 2 men in his mind at once, the boy who could not hit a curveball and the old man who could. We did not send them away for decades. That would be a lie that feels good. The law punishes specifically. They paid restitution for the funeral. They paid back the church for the food and the flowers and the gas card collection someone held in a coffee can for me that first awful week. They did community service because there are floors in our town that needed mopping for a winter and a half. June stood in the back of our church hall every Thursday for 3 months and ladled soup for people who came in with thin coats. I watched her hands move and remembered the thousands of times I had seen those hands do something quick and kind. I did not speak to her until the day she finished the last ladle. There was one thing the judge did that surprised me. He ordered a modification of their names. To return to them. He said there is a cost to abandoning words as old as a child's first breath. The day those papers were signed, the clerk mispronounced my last name and apologized, and I told her the truth. Holloway has been mispronounced for a century. But it is ours. Lily came to me on a Sunday in October. The maples in the yard were half red and half determinately green and made the sky look like a quilt my wife once stitched. She was 12 now, wearing a jacket that said her middle school name on the back, a backpack heavier with homework and a child's attempt to carry grown things. She stood at my front step and said, "Can I show you something?" I took her hand. The feel of that small palm inside my large one undid me better than any sermon. She led me around the side of the house to the Japanese maples. She touched the little brass plaques with a fingertip. "You do not have to take them down," she said. This was real. "How do you know that?" "Because you are real," she said. And I was a kid. I did not know how to argue with the way adults choose to run away. We sat together on the steps where Ruth used to set jars of beans to cool. Lily took a drawing from her backpack. It was one of those detailed things that children hand adults to prove that life, despite their elders, has exact lines and bright colors. My house. The 3 trees. A man with gray hair and a cane that is not really a cane but a stubborn limp. A girl standing beside him with her hand touching his. "That is us," she said. "At the right funeral." "What is the right funeral?" I asked. "The one where you put the wrong things in the ground and leave the right ones above it." I had, in the months between confrontation and consequence, changed my will again. The scholarship fund got bigger, and its charter grew teeth. It is for kids who stand in rooms where adults made them hold things that were too heavy, who still chose to bring light. The house will someday be sold to endow a room at the county hospice with a sign above the door that reads, "Rest until you remember who you are." I told Pastor Helen she could argue with the grammar later. On the first warm day in April, I gathered my VFW men, Mrs. Alvarez with her strong hands, and the boy with the too big baseball cap. We took down the brass plaques with a screwdriver. I set the plates in a shoebox and closed the lid. We planted daffodil bulbs around the maples in an unashamedly exuberant circle. "Why daffodils?" Lily asked. "Because they refuse to believe in winter past a point," I said. "They are not brave like people, but they do the best they can for a flower." June wrote me a letter in late spring. She did not use words like forgive or mistake. She used words like chose and knew and understand if you cannot. I read it in my kitchen with the peppermint tin open beside my coffee cup and set it in the drawer with the rubber bands and the emergency birthday candles Ruth bought in bulk 4 summers before she died. There are letters you keep not because they fix anything, but because they testify to the way a person finally stood still. When June finishes her community service, she will leave for Texas again. She is allowed to live where she wishes. I am allowed to decide which tables my chair belongs at. The court required that I be part of a mediated agreement about Lily's visits. We set up every other Thanksgiving and the first 2 weeks of July. I sent Lily home with a bag of mints and a book Ruth loved and a note that says, "Be kind and brave." She knows whose handwriting it is. I still go to the grocery store on Tuesdays. I still talk back to the evening news like a man who does not expect to be listened to but enjoys the sport. I still sit in my garage sometimes and run my hands over the smooth boards of the workbench like the wood might remember the secrets of the things it bore. The urns are gone. I took them back to the church quietly and asked Pastor Helen to keep them in the storage closet where we keep the folding chairs and the communion cups we only bring out at Christmas. She asked, with her gentle persistence, if I wanted a blessing spoken over the empty metal. "You do not bless containers," I told her. "You bless content." She nodded and laid a hand on my shoulder anyway. There is a photograph on my mantle. Ruth hated mantles, dust catchers, she called them, but I needed a place to put evidence. The photograph is not of my daughter. It is of Lily and me in the backyard between two maples that look, from that angle, like one tree. Her hand is in mine. We are not smiling. We are looking at something to our left that the picture did not catch. There is a way we both lean that makes the viewer want to step into the frame and follow our gaze. If you pay attention, you see everything you think is dead. Not every story gives you the satisfaction of a judge's gavel like thunder. Not every betrayal ends with handcuffs. Sometimes the consequence is as simple as this: every town they live in from now on will know that two adults once stood in a small room and said, "We prefer the quiet of our own hands to the noise of another man's old age." The internet is forever. So is the memory of the woman at their Texas church whose mouth rounded into an O when she saw the video the prosecutor showed and realized the prayer chain she had started 3 summers ago was for people buying grapefruit with new names. There is a thing everyone who came to my odd memorial told me when they left: this made me want to put my boots on and step toward someone. If that is the funeral I gave my living, I have done exactly what I promised in that grocery store aisle. I buried what needed burying. I left the rest above ground. And when the daffodils jump in April like small suns, there is a moment every year when I stand in the doorway and say the names of the people I have, in one way or another, lost. Ruth. June. Nathan. Lily. Only one of those names means grief now. The others mean the thing you plant when the fire has passed and the ash has cooled enough to take a seed. Sometimes on Sunday afternoons, I open the peppermint tin and take 2 and put 1 in each pocket and walk to the church hall. There is always someone to feed. There is always a chair to put away. There is always a child who can be bribed into a smile with mint. That is as close to revenge as a man like me gets without burning his own house down. And once in a long while, when the crowd thins and the coffee is tired and my knee has announced itself like a weather report, I feel a small hand slip into mine. "Hi, Grandpa," Lily says. "Hi, kiddo. Want to hear what I did in science?" "I want to hear everything." She talks. I listen. We stand next to a room full of noise. The past presses against us from all sides, demanding attention like an ill-fitting coat. We let it slide to the floor. We choose the thing my daughter typed and then betrayed and then, perhaps, is learning again. Be kind and brave. It is not a verdict. It is a vow. The rest of it, the papers, the judgment, the whispers, the corrective footnote my town now attaches to the word Harper, rides the wind like chaff. What feeds us is what we keep. And what I kept, after 3 summers and 1 grocery aisle and a long, careful burial, is simply this: I am still here. I am not erased. I am the man with peppermint in his pocket and a girl at his side in a life that, against a great deal of evidence to the contrary, refuses to be small.
Hello everyone, and thank you for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel to help support the creation of more stories like this. Have a great day or evening.